let me request our inaugural speakers to join us on the stage. Let me welcome Shri Rajesh Agrawal ji, Secretary, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Government of India, to come on the stage, please. So, give a big round of applause. Up to the stage, please. Let me request Professor K.K. Agarwal, who is the Chairman of National Board of Accreditation, NBA, to kindly come on the stage, sir. We are honored to have you here. Thank you. And we are all aware that Professor Agarwal is a mentor. He is a guide to almost all the major universities of this country, and many of the current vice chancellors and directors of various institutions have actually grown under his mentorship and guidance. Let me request Dr. Madhu Chitkara, who is Pro-Chancellor of Chitkara University, Punjab and Himachal Pradesh. Welcome on the stage. We are aware that the role of private universities in the higher education ecosystem of India has been increasing over the last decade. And we would have her views on the perspectives on NEP, National Education Policy, from a private university angle perspective. And let me request Raghav Gupta, who is the Managing Director, India and Asia Pacific for Coursera, to be here. We are all aware that how much the growth of online learning has happened in the last 18 months, and creation opportunities of online learning and offline learning, and the future of hybrid learning. I think these are the angles which will be discussed by Raghavji. So I think we have a great panel on the screen, like on the stage. So it's like habit of Zoom. I'm like saying the screen. It's actually real stage actually. So let me request all our inaugural speakers to kindly light the lamp and inaugurate this World Education Summit, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. That Rajesh ji was the earlier IT Secretary of the Government of Maharashtra around 15 years back when we started this magazine. And the kind of steps he took to build IT initiatives in Maharashtra is still remembered. And after that, he also handled the IT in, he was the Education Secretary of Government of Maharashtra. So a lot of IT initiatives in education happened in Maharashtra state because of him, both in the school and higher education sector. And after that, he has been part of he was a Joint Secretary of Department of Finance, Government of India. He also Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Oil and Natural Gas, and now he's the Secretary of Skill Development. So he has a wide range of experience, and I can guarantee that the what you will hear in the next 10 minutes will actually be inspiring. Thank you, sir. Please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So where do I start? Don't have a prepared speech, so I will speak from the heart. And First of all, congrats to the entire ELETS team and Ravi Gupta for organizing this physical summit this time, and which is also a good sign that the country is getting out of the pandemic, and we are back to, again, physical meetings and physical classes, which is very important in the education sector. So let me start from many centuries ago, thousands of years ago. Bharat was absolutely the world's #1 nation by any standards, in terms of GDP, in terms of exports, in terms of education and skills. So we had world famous Nalanda and Takshila universities. We were very good in philosophy, mathematics, Aryabhatta and all, astronomy, surgery. So great in regular education courses, and we were great in skills. Whether it was musical dance forms or paintings, we had Ajanta paintings and sculpture, and mining and minerals, and we still have those pillars and metal remnants which don't rust. So we were best in the mining, and so our diamonds were very famous across the world. Our craftsmanship in textiles was extremely famous across the world. So we were best in education and skills, and by those standards. And when you talk of education and skill standards, you talk of world standards at that point in time. But unfortunately, last few centuries, we got into slavery, and so how do you break a nation? Basically, if you want to rule over a nation as an outsider, how do you break that nation's spirits? You kill the education system, you kill the pride in their own culture. हमें क्या हुआ, हम अंग्रेजी पसंद देश बन गए, हम हर चीज़ पे मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए डिपेंडेंट हो गए, बर्मिंघम वगैरह पे. So we lost our skills and our education system was killed. Basically, openly their policy paper said कि हमें education system को kill करना है. So when we got independence, the nation was decimated, absolutely decimated. Practically no education system fit for the country, no skill ecosystem fit for the country, no factories, nothing. That's why in 50s, when we go through parliament debates and we go through the minutes of the labor ministers conference and so on, or education ministers conference, the whole thing was that nation had to be rebuilt from zero, right, starting from 47. So we have seen education policies evolve in last 70, 80 years. And so 50s saw the emergence of IITs and ITIs. So IITs for producing world-class engineers, ITIs for technicians. We had to build the roads, we had to build the dams, we had to build the power plants, we had to build pharma plants, steel plants, we had to build aeronautic plants, so all the public sector units came up. So since I am skills secretary now, so I'm focusing on skills also. And so it was a government-driven initiative in education and skills after independence. 70s, 80s, different states, we saw privatization of education, school education, college education. And we always had a very good philanthropic streak in the country, right from thousands of years ago. So we have all these philanthropy-driven colleges we always had, actually. But sort of privatization of education started happening in 70s and 80s. Skill education, it started with IT skills, actually. So late 80s, 90s, you saw IT shops, IT coaching centers in every street of the country, tier 2 cities also, tier 3 cities also. So in IT, then Y2K came, and we came from basically zero exports in IT to $1 billion exports and $100 billion exports. And now we talk of $1 trillion hardware and software economy in the next 3-4 years. But other skill sectors did not see that investment. So in last 10 years, the country moved from traditional manufacturing skilling only to banking sector, insurance sector, a lot of other sectors came up. So we needed skills in all of these. So we have now sector skill councils, very vibrant sector skill councils across the country in multiple sectors, and headed by very reputed persons. For example, health sector skill council is headed by Dr. Naresh Trehan and so on. So we have basically the best people in the industry guiding the sector skill councils, creating syllabus and curriculum, which is sort of standardized, which does better job matchmaking. क्योंकि अभी इंडस्ट्री का ग्राउज क्या है कि अवर एजुकेशन सिस्टम एंड स्किल सिस्टम इज नॉट प्रोड्यूसिंग किड्स और ग्रेजुएट्स हु आर एम्प्लॉयबल. फिर से पढ़ाना पड़ता है उनको कि आदमी ने बीए कर लिया, बीएससी कर लिया, बीटेक कर लिया या आईटीआई कर लिया, इंडस्ट्री कहती है ये तो फिट नहीं है जी, फिर से ट्रेनिंग देनी पड़ेगी. So that's why our courses have to be dynamic. Our regulators, UGC, AICT, NCVT, and our bureaucrats in these ministries. So we have to be very dynamic. We have to shake hands with industry, and the syllabus has to be prepared by the employers themselves. So there will be academicians. So academia and industry handshake and bureaucracy handshake and regulator handshake has to be really strong and very collaborative. Luckily now, I think there is a design behind it. The new education policy talks a lot about employability, entrepreneurship, relevance of job roles, dynamism in syllabus. That syllabus should be flexible. For example, if you are teaching an artificial intelligence course to a, let us say in 10th class or in MSc or in BTech, each batch course may be slightly different. So you can't have the same syllabus for 5 years by the regulator or by the university senate. So each batch may be different. The changes are so fast, thick and fast. So this dynamism has to be there, and we are trying to do it. The new education policy luckily puts in that framework. And we also have now the same minister, one minister, Dharmendra Pradhan ji, for education and skills. So in last 2 months since I have joined as skills secretary, I, as skills secretary, school education secretary Anita Karwal, higher education secretary Sanjay Murthy, all three regulators, we practically meet at least once a week to ensure that we all are in the same direction. And very soon you will see a credit transfer framework before next academic session. You will see skill courses, carpentry, electrician, or AI at the same footing with the physics or history, whether it's 10th class or BA or whatever. So a lot of those things are coming. And especially in skill sector, we are attracting a lot of now philanthropic money, lot of industry, whether it's Samsung or Tata's or Mahindra's or let us say Lakme or it's Pantaloons or across sectors. People are going to ITIs and our skill universities, setting up labs, giving teachers, taking apprentices from there. Now digital apprentices are coming up. So if a 4-year student wants to spend 1 year in industry, shop floor or hospital or whatever, so that should be feasible. So that should not be just like a hobby internship course. So all of these things are coming, and I'm happy to be part of this, and I plan to be here for next 1 hour at least and listen to other eminent people. And once again, best wishes to all the audience and best wishes to all the students who might be on the virtual platform. And once again, congrats to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words and your encouragement to the entire team of WES. May I now invite Dr. Ravi Gupta to kindly give his address and take the session forward, sir.
Thank you, Rajesh, sir. And let me invite our industry expert, Raghav Gupta, who is heading the Coursera for India and APAC here on the stage. Welcome. And I think his views will give that industry angle and online learning angle, which is very, very critical in these situations. Thank you.
Shri Agarwal, Dr. Agarwal, Mr. Gupta, Dr. Chitkara, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be here at an in-person event and also to hear from Shri Agarwal about how senior leaders in the government are thinking about the future of the country, the future of skilling. I have a few points to share. There are 4 broad points I'd like to share. And before we talk about higher education, I'd like to talk about what's happening in industry a little bit very quickly as well. All of us know this from first-hand experience. COVID has been a tough period for us personally. It's also been a tough period from a professional standpoint. Not many people might realize this, but across the country, we lost almost 1 crore jobs over the last 1.5 years. And 90% plus households found that their incomes decreased during the course of the pandemic. So it's been a tough situation economically for sure. At Coursera, we work with a lot of companies, and almost 90% of businesses have said that they are increasing the digitalization of their businesses. The amount of digital technologies companies are going to use in the country are increasing as well. And it is important from a higher education standpoint, which is why I want to bring it up. The third thing that we are seeing is even after the pandemic goes away, and hopefully it will, remote work for a lot of working professionals like us will continue even after the pandemic. And I was talking to Dr. Madhu Chitkara that maybe campuses will come back to being on campus fully, but for many of us in companies, maybe 30, 40, 50% of work will continue to happen digitally. And it is true not just for the IT sector, but it is true for retail, it is true for healthcare, it is true for manufacturing and many other industries as well. And while we have seen these 1 crore job losses in the country over the last 1.5 years, the good news is that organizations like Microsoft say that there are 3 crore new jobs that will get created in the country over the next 2-3 years. And many of these jobs are in the digital space, they are in the data-oriented space. So traditional jobs have been under pressure, but lots of new opportunities are coming up. And in that context, I think thinking about higher education is quite important. At Coursera, we work with about 4,000 colleges and universities around the world, of which about 1,100 are in India. And in talking to leaders of these institutions, we have seen 4 big challenges that the industry faces. The first has been about blended teaching. And while faculty and colleges and universities have been forced to teach online, reality has been that before the pandemic, very few faculty had taught online. And to be able to transition to teaching online has not been easy. You know, I was reading this interview by Dr. Rao, the director of IIT Delhi in Indian Express a few months ago. And he said that even a great teacher who is very good at teaching in the classroom is not necessarily skilled to be able to teach online in a very engaging manner. It's a difficult skill. So firstly, blended teaching is something that takes doing, it takes work to happen. Secondly is employability, student employability. And Shri Agarwal spoke about this as well, that industry even pre-pandemic used to struggle to find employable graduates. And now after the pandemic, where digital skills, data skills, human skills have become even more important in all sectors, employability has become a fairly big challenge for all of us in higher education. Third is access and costs. We've all heard about the digital divide around online education. You know, students may not have devices, students may not have internet connectivity, and that's been a challenge. And if somebody is a higher education leader here, I don't need to talk about the pressures around costs and business models in higher education. And then underlying all of this has been faculty development, because if we have to provide education of the future to students, obviously faculty need to be able to provide that education. And so faculty development has become even more important than ever before. Now, in all of this, online education, you know, companies like Coursera have had a big role to play, and I'd like to share a little bit of what we've been doing in the last 1.5, 2 years. On the Coursera platform in India, there are 1.5 crore learners who come to our platform. So it's a large platform, 1.5 crore students and working professionals come to our platform to learn. And over the course of the last year, 1.5 in fact, we made Coursera for Campus available for free to all colleges and campuses around the world as well as in the country. In India, we had 1,100 campuses where 15 lakh students came and took 1.4 crore courses for free. And with Dr. Agarwal, we were just talking that, you know, students have shown where their hunger lies in terms of what they want to learn when they're given free choice, in terms of coming and consuming this massive amount of learning that we have seen on the Coursera platform. I must say we're very thankful to the AICTE because Dr. Sahasrabudde's office promoted this program last year in March. They informed all campuses that the Coursera platform was available for free. And based on this partnership, we were able to see this massive adoption happen in the country, and we were able to serve all these campuses and students with. Firstly, use of technology in education is a key element of the NEP. A lot of the data points that I've shown already reflect to the fact that we can significantly support the adoption both of consuming online content but also creating online content as a part of the NEP. Second, multidisciplinary learning. It is hard for universities and colleges to get faculty across different disciplines under their wing. And today, universities like Manipal, universities like Symbiosis, Shiv Nadar University, and also government institutions like DTU, Delhi Technological University, NITI, are currently providing multidisciplinary learning to their students via the Coursera platform. And as a part of the NEP, this is something that we can continue to support. And then the last point around internationalization, bringing the best of the world to Indian students and Indian working professionals, but also, like I said, taking content from the top Indian institutions to the rest of the world is going to be very exciting. IIT Roorkee has launched a certificate on data science and machine learning on Coursera. IIM Bombay has launched a certificate on electric vehicles and on digital transformation on Coursera. More than 60% of the learners on these courses are coming from outside the country. They're coming from the United States, they're coming from Europe, they're coming from the rest of Asia as well. And so these three pillars is where we believe we can play a big role in supporting the vision of the government and in supporting the needs of higher education. I'll pause with that. Thank you so much for your time and for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, for showing us the way ahead. Thank you so much. May I now invite Professor K.K. Agrawal, Chairman, National Board of Accreditation, for sharing his views, sir. Welcome, sir.
Distinguished guests this morning, Shri Rajesh Agrawal ji, Secretary, Ministry of Skills, Dr. Madhu Chitkara, Pro-Chancellor of a very upcoming and happening university in the country, Chitkara University, Shri Raghav Gupta, trying to promote very successfully online education in this country by way of Coursera platform. Dr. Ravi Gupta, who has been in contact with me for last 2 decades when I was Vice Chancellor of IP University, for promoting the cause of education in general all the time by holding several high-quality conferences and bringing the people together. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to be with the people interested in education because I believe whatsoever hard work many of us may do, the work to be done in education will still be more than what we are doing. It's such a demanding field, it's such an open field, and a lot more has to be done than what has been done. So I'm so happy that this conference on higher education, Dr. Ravi thought of doing it face-to-face. I think someday we have to make ourselves believe that we'll be taking all steps, but Corona has gone. And we have to learn to live with it, and face-to-face networking is very important. As a matter of fact, networking is also a mode of education which has been well recognized. Unless you network, you really don't learn many things in life. Statistics tells us that you learn in life whatever you use, you just learn only 15% of that in the classroom. Rest 85% is outside the classroom, by meeting people, by going to places, by experimenting, by seeing, by observing, and so on and so forth. This is a published statistic. And therefore, unless we learn to go outside the classroom also, things don't happen. And therefore, I welcome it as a first step after Corona's peak. Friends, I think I'll put on record the appreciation of the decision of the Government of India to begin with, to put one minister at least in charge of education and skills. I think this division between education and skills, which Rajesh ji has explained to some extent, was artificially created by some either vested interests or out of lack of knowledge. We should not have ever discriminated education and skill. Education will be at different levels always, skill will also be at different levels always, but creating a boundary between education and skill was probably a very wrong decision. I remember when I started IP University in Delhi, I saw one of the surveys results. 90% of the students of Delhi University will attend a college in the forenoon and then run home to a computer center to take up another course in computers. I mean, I must compliment NIT. NIIT did a great job by starting GNIIT. But the question remains, why universities could not satisfy what the students need? Where is the need for us in the education system to force the student to go to another training center in the afternoon, pressurizing his or her time, putting lot of stress, lot of financial expenditure, and lot of worries to the parents, the traveling in the buses, late evening, so on and so forth. So when I started IP University, first thing I told my academic team is, please make sure what the student needs and plan your courses accordingly. We are here for students. We are not here for dissemination what we know. And I think I very strongly believe in this. And during the Corona also in one of the webinars I told that forget what you know, only learn to teach what the student needs. And that has to be done. And I remember an IAS officer was there. He says, I can take it as a webinar statement of the day that this is required. Because we in the universities started believing that giving knowledge is a very pious thing, which it is, and my duty stops at that. Practice what they used to do. But how many of them really know that while at that time Takshila had 10,000 students from all university in India, but Takshila was a university which was giving very high level of knowledge, but at the same time it was conducting skill courses like snake charming was a course, formal course in the university, how to become a snake charmer, because that was the requirement of the day. We needed people who could become snake charmers, and a very high-end, best international university in the world did not shy away from starting this 3-month course on snake charming. I think that is where our universities made a mistake, that we are on high pedestal. We will give only high degrees and we will not come to the ground level. वो हमारा काम नहीं है. वो polytechnics करें, वो ITIs करें, वो ये करें. I think that's a mistake which we made. University is for the learners, and whatever learner requires has to be done. That had to be the mantra. We practiced it, succeeded it to some extent, but then that has to be carried forward. So I'm very happy that at least one step has been taken, that the minister is common. I think sooner or later we may probably try to make the ministry also same, but the only problem is Ministry of Education itself is such a big ministry that to add to it may have its own administrative issues, but that's for later. But the coordination which Rajesh ji has indicated will probably do this country very good. Mr. Raghav talked about Coursera's impact during COVID. Yes, it's a very welcome step. And as he pointed out, I think this has given us an opportunity to make a survey what the student wanted to learn which the university was not offering. And immediately lead to the question why the university is not offering that. Because again I say, if student wants to learn something, there is no reason on earth the university not to teach it. I can't find any reason for that. It has to be done. So I think it's a very good initiative, and the country should stand to benefit by this. Regulation in this country by and large has been over-regulation. Education has been a very highly regulated sector. Now things are relaxing a little, but we have yet to see how the things take shape, because light what tight is easily written, but how it's actually practiced in ground, only the time will tell. Only the nice part is intentions seem to be very clear at the moment. I personally believe education can be structured somewhat, but education cannot be regulated very strongly. Whenever education is given a freedom, then only education thrives. So unless the universities are really autonomous, and let them learn by making mistakes at times, doesn't matter. Let the students act as a feedback mechanism to tell the university, sir, why this course, why not this course? And the university should have the freedom to change that course next day. That will be the only method to learn. Everybody talks about the past, but we don't really learn the lessons from the past. I said when 5 Pandavas went to the same Guru, the Guru and the Pandavas decided together that Arjuna will become a good learner in Dhanushban Vidya and Bhima will become a good student in Gada. There was no entrance test to decide who will go to Dhanushban and who will go to Gada. It was the mutual aptitude and attitude which was assessed by the teacher to decide that that is the best thing to do. And to some extent, foreign universities still do that. While we have all the reason to learn from our ancient places, I think some of the modern good practices from universities abroad also need to be kept in mind. It is only in this country every vice chancellor, every secretary is questioned for the system of admission. You talk to Yale, you talk to Harvard, you talk to Stanford, you talk to Berkeley, they say it's our right whom to admit, whom not to admit. We will decide what sort of students we need to be trained. It's our choice. And nobody questions them. Because the requirements are very clear. How do I want to shape my university is my decision. And for that, what kind of students I need to admit, what kind of industries I want to connect, all that has to be my choice. This way that if you get 1 mark more, you are fit to study computer science, and if you get half mark less, you are not fit to study computer science, you can only study mechanical engineering or civil engineering, is probably worst kind of decision. We had to take it because of the game of numbers, but I think we'll soon learn to find ways and means. We, during this period, have talked about self-learning a lot. Online education has fortunately given us a platform that self-learning can be done, and the students have done it pretty successfully. It brings us back to the Gurukul system in some sense, where a teacher could design the degree for a student. Now, unless you are able to do that in some perspective, outcome-based education really doesn't happen. Outcome-based education can never happen if a university writes the syllabus for 600 colleges and gives to them, teach this. No option. So the best thing which I like in this national education policy is system of affiliated colleges will go away. So nobody else will decide the syllabus, the institution itself will decide the syllabus. Institution itself will learn how to conduct the course. And self-learning has to be a part of the life. Online education has taught us this. I think Mr. Raghav was saying that campuses will become face-to-face. Yes, they will, they should, and I hope they become sooner. But then we have now learned, earlier we could give only 40 courses because we didn't have the classrooms, and maybe 2-3 electives, things like that. Now I can give a lot of electives to be taken online. So that is the advantage which we have now, because we have learned online education can also be effective means of education, and therefore designing flexible degrees for the students is now a reality of life which should be done. And students by and large are great self-learners. Again, if I give an example from Mahabharata, which is the trend of the day, Guru Dronacharya refused to teach Eklavya for whatever reason. Today, if somebody does that, he will be put to jail. But he said, no, I don't think you are a fit student, I won't take you. He says, sir, I don't care. You give me a permission to stand before your statue and practice. And I will show you that I can. And he did that. So the point which I'm trying to say is more inspiration is needed than direct teaching as such. So therefore, this mix of online and this, and then 4-year degree program, for example, is a very new thing in the domain of this national education policy. And the 4th year can be used so varietyfully. I've sent a paper of that to the ministry, that if somebody wants to be a teacher, let us say, let him use this 4th year for learning teaching pedagogy. If somebody wants to go to management education after BSc, let him use 4th year to learn basics of management. If somebody wants to go to post-graduation, which will be 1 year, so there will be a shortfall there, he can learn the subject in 4th year. If somebody wants to be a practical thing, he can do the industrial training in 4th year. So we can have a lot of flexibility. And finally, friends, I believe we will have to devise the systems where the student can be the master of what he or she wants to learn. We should be facilitators. As long as we keep on deciding what you should learn, I think education will never bring out the best in the youth, which I can assure you with my 50+ years of education, that students of this country know much more what they wish to learn than we know what we wish to teach them. We will have to believe that and take some small degree of risk. Our education system teaches us not to take any risk. We are used to, this is the question and this is the answer. If you write a different answer, you fail. That's our system. And that system is the most dangerous system in the world. We must make sure that the student thinks, even if he gives a wrong answer, if he can tell me how he thought of it, I'll give him full grade, because thinking is important, not the final answer. And nature has taught humanity to take risks. I was reading a paper, lion, who is called the king of jungle. He also succeeds only 25% of the times in his prey. 75% of the times even lion fails. But in our system, vice chancellor is not permitted to make a single mistake. Director is not permitted to make a single mistake. Student is not permitted to make a single mistake in the examination, otherwise he loses a year. So unless we permit risk-taking, and nature is the greatest teacher, seeds, I mean, not 5% of the seeds become trees. Rest 95% are blown away. That's the wastage. Raindrops, 98% is wastage. So nature has taught us wastage is okay, failure is okay, but we give so much emphasis and force on so-called success that we ultimately defeat our own purpose of making a creative graduates, and in the process maybe sometimes do more damage to education than really doing that. NEP is a great enabling platform. How do we use it is dependent on us. And I strongly believe unless everybody in this country, every bureaucrat, every teacher, every vice chancellor, every student wants to make full use of these enabling clauses in NEP, we will really be nowhere. So we will have to encourage this enablement to the extent we can, and then only we'll reap the best fruits of this very good document called NEP. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you, Ravi, for inviting me on this platform. Wish you all the best. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. May I now request Dr. Madhu Chitkara, Pro-Chancellor, Chitkara University, Punjab and Himachal Pradesh, to come and deliver her address. Welcome, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody on the dais and off the dais. I think sometimes the last speaker becomes very relaxed because everything is done by the other speakers, and sometimes it becomes very challenging for the last speaker to be on the stage because so many good speakers were there and now I'm the last one. But first of all, I must congratulate Dr. Ravi Gupta that first time IELTS is inviting us. I think this is the second session which we are doing together for physical presence. So first was we did last week, and the second is this. So it's good to meet socially everybody. I always say that it was a very bad word used during last 1.5 years that there should be a social distancing. It should not be social distancing. It was all physical distancing, and we were socially connected to each other much better than when we were socially meeting. So I think you have met each other during lockdown, which we were not able to meet otherwise. So during the Zoom sessions, during all the sessions, we were able to meet each other, and we know each other very well. Today's topic and whatever we wanted to talk about, Rajeshji was talking about that how the skill is involved in the new national education policy. Raghav was talking about that how the students were benefited and even the teachers were benefited by their courses like Coursera or the online courses. Agarwal sir was always very clear that how the regulators and how the educational providers should come together to give something. I just want to quote one of the points quoted by Dr. Agarwal, that all the two Agarwals are there. So Dr. K.K. Agarwal, he said that in Mahabharata, Dronacharya and the Eklavya was formally was not a part of his teaching learning processes. So what he did long back, you can understand that what he did long back, it was just like a MOOC course for him. Because formally he was not coached by Dronacharya, but Arjun was done, and he was just by distance, he was just observing the lessons given by that guru, and he learned everything. So it means those times also, there was a combination of which we are telling nowadays that there is a hybrid learning, and the future will be also like this. There will be something online, there will be something offline, and the students also started enjoying. The teachers have also started enjoying doing those things. And the best thing is that now we are saying that the choice-based learning will be there, that those courses should be part of it. And well said by Dr. K.K. Agarwal that previously we were not able to do that. What was the reason we were not able to do that? The time was a constraint. There were in 6 periods in a day, and normally the universities and the higher education colleges are working for 5 days for the teaching, and the 6th and 7th day are normally for the other activities, or there is a gap for that. So now since there is a hybrid learning and you can learn and you can give the credit to the courses which they have done, any of the platforms like Coursera, that they are learning something. So if we talk about national education policy, after 34 years of the policy came, and you all have understood that what national education policy, and this is the first time, I think after 34 years, it has gone to the people who are the actual stakeholders. Now you see today's scenario. Today we all are together, the people from regulatory bodies, people from industry, people from academia. So all are here, and I think some of the students must be there. So all the stakeholders are at one platform where we can understand, we can discuss. So this is a conference, this is a meeting for 2 days, 17th and 18th, they have written. So whatever we are interacting with each other, whatever the resultants are, I think we should try to learn from the best practices of each other. This is a best time because physically we are meeting each other, we should learn. So in national education policy, they have talked about from the school education to the higher education, and the best, which is a challenge for all of us, is that how to implement it, how to execute it. And now it becomes a responsibility of the regulators to give us the directions. Because last time when I asked one of the regulators that please give us the directions, they said, why you are not doing it? You are the people who have to do that, you have to implement that in your organizations. But when we tried to implement it, one of the regulators said in Himachal, they said that please wait for our directions, we will give you the direction to implement. But national education policy is not stating that. They are saying that it is your wish, your will, that how the choice-based learning credits are to be given. And the best part is that ABC is introduced. So Academic Bank of Credit, I am very confused that how we are doing it, we have started doing it, that the students are taking the interdisciplinary courses. One of my students from hospitality took up one of the course in gaming from design school. And he took that during this lockdown, and now he is coming to me and he said that he was very clear about the national education policy. He said there is ABC, there is the Academic Bank of Credit, where this bank will take my credit and you will put it and give me the passbook. And he was very clear and very smart also. So now it is a challenge for all of us sitting here that how to implement it. We can discuss amongst ourselves. Don't wait for the regulators to give the directions. And let us start from today and take the oath that, yes, we have to do it. Now, in Chitkara University, we have two universities in Himachal and Punjab, in the north of the country. And it's not that I'm proud to tell you that we are doing this. It's just that by default, we are the early entrants in the incubation field. And we started doing startups, and we are giving the seed money. In 2007, we started doing that. It was not that we were prepared for it. It was, sometimes we say that is a challenge and we make it an opportunity. And there was a challenge from one of my students, and he came to me. He was placed by a campus placement drive. 1 year he worked with HCL and then came back, and he said that, no, ma'am, I want to do something of my own. Please give me, my salary is 50,000 per month. Give me some money for, at least for 6 months, I want to work on my product. So we took that as a challenge that let us see that what is this. And I was not very clear that this is called a seed money or this is a startup. He's coming up with an idea. So from there only, this is the resultant of that 2007 cases that we are 188 startups in our campus, in our incubation center. And they have gone for the commercialization, and during lockdown, they earned a lot. So I think whenever you have an opportunity, try to grab it. And the second thing which National Education Policy is saying, and which I think we all at our campuses should try to do it, that they are saying that we can declare our university, it's your wish. You can do it that you say, today my university is a hardcore teaching university. So if it is a teaching university, you will be accredited or you will be evaluated, keeping in mind the components of teaching learning processes. So it's so good. So you are saying that I'm ready for it. My staff is saying that we are very good in teaching. What we did till 2014, we just concentrated on the teaching learning modules, and we were good in teaching. So after 2014, our think tank came together and they said, now we are ready for going some of the research components also. So from there onwards, we started working on the research. So now the NEP is saying that if today you say, and you declare, so 4 years you are saying that I am a teaching university. After 4 years, you say that I am a research university. And you just please come and evaluate me, keeping in mind that how we have to be evaluated. So I think it's so good, and they are talking about all the verticals of it. They are saying that there should be a academia industry interface, and you have seen that there are industries sitting here, the academia sitting here, the regulators sitting here. So already we have started working together, whatever their requirements are. I will give you one example, and I think you all are doing it in your campuses. We always have a board of studies and the board of management where we make some of the industry guys a part of it. Some of the people from the parent side, they are part of it. And some of the students, or sometimes we take the suggestions. So the NEP is saying that please document it and try to talk to the industry, what are their requirements? I think Rajeshji was mentioning that when they go to the industry, for 6 months or for 1 year, they are doing the internship or they are doing the programs of that industry, and then only they start earning. But if from day one we are talking to the industry, and there are the center of excellences in your department, in your university, and from day one the industry is part of the academia, I think there will not be any problem of their placements, and they are ready for the future. So these are the components which NEP states. And the best part is that for school education, the higher education is an industry. So the school students are coming to the higher education, but problem with us is that sometimes we tell them to unlearn the facts which they have earned. Reason being that the higher education is very different, school education is very different, and there is a vacuum, there is a gap.
Involved, then the academia will also then align with the industry needs. So let me ask some questions to the panelists. I think we had some very, very interesting session, and we have eminent people on this stage. Requesting Rajesh Agrawal, sir, to answer the first question which I wish to ask him. It is about what is the skill which employers need, and in these changing times, how are these needs changing? Your views, sir.
Okay, so what do employers look at when they interview a potential employee? If you ask this question before the COVID, and summary of global studies is, what do employers look? Answer was confidence, confidence, confidence. It was not hard skills. And after COVID, again, the broad summary of global studies is, what do employers look? Now the answer is ability to adapt and to unlearn, learn or reskill. So unlearn, learn and reskill or upgradation. So, and ability to adapt. So that's what the employees look at. So the employability skills being taught in our skill system now have all these soft skills and these kind of analytic thinking. That's more important than your degrees or your hard skills now.
So, asking another question like added to it, there has been a discussion which Professor Agrawal has mentioned about there is a difference between education and skill in our country, and both have been like kept separate. Are there any initiatives, like you have mentioned in your speech already, that you and the Ministry of Education officers are like discussing every week? But in this context of the last 18 months, and where the difference between education, skill, employment, all the three have been like converging at various places, and there is a lot of synergy needed, and adoption of online learning. So how do you see these four pieces of the puzzle: education, skill, employability, and online tools which are now available thanks to COVID? So how do we put all these four pieces together, if you have any views on this?
You see, but all the speakers also said the same thing basically, that plain classroom teaching will not result in many jobs. So our kids have to be they have to do analytical thinking, they have to get experiential kind of learning experience, they have to be explored. For example, now we are talking of 6 to 8 class kids, actually 10 bagless days where they will be taken to industry or to bank or other nearby industries, and they will get that exposure. 9 to 12 kids, the vocational kind of courses, getting the same traction, same recognition as your physics or history or English class. And then UGC also is encouraging, and we are also encouraging that BA, BSc, BTechs or MTechs and all courses, they can have even up to 1/3 of hands-on skill or skill courses. For example, in Gujarat University, they are now in 3-year BA course of history. For 1 year, kids can go into art appreciation course or museum curating course or whatever. And that is actually now a part of their history syllabus. Kids can choose between 6-7 skills. So where they want to go potentially after doing that BA history. So skills need to be embedded in every course. And now the summer vacation internships, they need to be expanded to basically credit-based courses, including digital apprenticeships. For example, in IT, the kid should be able to spend one semester with Microsoft or Google or Coursera purely online and not going to classes, regular classes. So those regulatory flexibilities are coming. Those industry is also moving into the educational space also in that way. So, and I hope over next 2-3 years, we'll see much more of it in action.
Great, sir. I think that this idea of history students actually going to the historical sites and learning is a very, very interesting idea, which is a great thing. Yeah.
I will give you, Raviji, one example, and actually we have seen that we have adopted the villages around our university. So those are the government schools. And what we have done is that in the evenings, our labs are free and the things are free there. So the students are coming to the campus, and there were the epic courses were running. So they were sitting with the senior students and they were just going through that what they are doing. Bhaiya, aap kya kar rahe ho? Didi, aap kya kar rahe ho? Itna hi keh ke, and they were just interacting. So unme se, I'm amazed to see that particular one of the students, with the help of his teacher, he has applied for the seed money and has gone for the one of the patents. So that was the resultant of that when they are coming and you are giving them the skills and they have a potential. Just you have to explore that, how to explore their potential to the fullest. And I think well said by sir that skills are there. By imbibing those values, I think the industry can help and the educational institutes can help.
Great inputs. I think I was at IIT Kanpur, and one of the best memories of IIT Kanpur which I have is that IIT professors had adopted schools, villages outside IIT, nearby IIT. And we used to go on the weekends and do some of the volunteering work. And I think the learning which I had there is very, very valuable. So I think these are the experiential learning which has to get encouraged. Let me go to Raghav and ask him that you mentioned about introducing this course on data science with IIT Roorkee. And we have been hearing about IITs going global, and there have been regulatory issues and financial issues and various other issues. So are you saying that the IIT Roorkee courses have become global because of being online? And now someone sitting in Africa can actually study at IIT Roorkee course on a Coursera platform? And asking you a wider question, that you are collaborating with the Indian universities to take their courses on the Coursera platform. So are you seeing this as an opportunity for showcasing our Indian education system and taking it global? So is it a reverse path? People have been complaining about our students going abroad. So will this help Indian education get access to the students outside India?
Absolutely. Like all of us know, I think 15 lakh students appear for the JEE, 15,000 get in. So I don't think there's any doubt that the demand for being able to study from an IIT is very, very large. All of us know of the examples of CEOs, Indian CEOs of global companies who've been very, very successful. So all of that is well known. I think our intent has been that, a lot of the top Indian institutions, the IITs, the IIMs, Indian Statistical Institute, have fantastic teachers, fantastic ability to teach. A lot of this has been happening in a classroom so far. And the only way to take that beyond is to be able to take that online onto a large platform and make it visible to people. Obviously, there's been a lot of work that we and the IITs have done to be able to translate high-quality classroom teaching to high-quality online teaching, because it takes a bit of a journey to do that. But essentially, what we have done is that as long as they are creating content in the fields which are in demand, and as long as that content is high quality from an online perspective, We are making it visible to 9 crore people across the world on our platform, and 1.5 crore of those people are in India. And then the product itself is doing what it needs to do, which is getting the interest of a lot of people. A lot of this content has not gone live yet. So the Indian Statistical Institute, ISI, is going to launch a diploma on the Coursera platform. It is going to be available to students in India, but also around the world. And with data science being such a high demand topic, we will very likely see a lot of people being quite interested in that. And jo aapne bola that this is definitely a case of taking the best of India to the rest of the world. Absolutely. I mean, that is exactly the intent here. And I think we should all feel quite proud about it. I know we definitely do so at Coursera.
Fantastic. I think this is another like one of those unexpected benefits of COVID, which has happened, that the adoption of these online platforms has so much increased in this university system that we are now thinking of like taking our courses global, which is a very, very important step. Yeah, let me ask Professor Agarwal. You mentioned several educational reforms which are needed. So asking you that what are the reforms which are needed to increase role of EdTech in this whole education system, where people are able to adopt online courses much more easily and go for hybrid model?
I think several steps, I'll count one by one. But before that, see, so far, acceptance of online education was very, very restrictive before COVID. What COVID has done subconsciously is to push us towards online education, and when we were pushed, we have proved the success of it reasonably well. I won't say it has been a perfect online education in most of the cases. As a matter of fact, we have to do much more to improve online education also. But at least the simple fact that 33 crore children had not to waste a year is a very, very great benefit in the whole world, which online education has done. And people in this hall may not appreciate, but just imagine online education being used by a primary school teacher in a village who had never learnt of online education, who even didn't have a smartphone to begin with, and so on and so forth. Teaching drawing via a smartphone. I mean, it may not have been a perfect job, but it was done. So therefore, now the acceptability of online education is there. I repeat, quality has to go much more, because we really never got the time to design online education. We only delivered the normal content through online. So it was only one part of implementation. Online education will really have to be designed very perfectly. For example, one very simple thing in online education research is your learning modules should be about 20 minutes, not 60 minutes. Now, how do you do that? Give a 20-minute module, then maybe a video, then maybe something. Because online education research all over the world indicates a teacher should not talk for 60 minutes online. But we had been doing that because, as I said, we were a substitution mode, not on a transformation mode still. But now we will. Now with this online education, flexibility is much easy to build in. As I told earlier also, earlier choice-based credit system and all that, but how many more classrooms could you create? How many more teachers you could create? So therefore, you had to have your hands up on the flexibility to a limit. But now, when we say a student of engineering can take 2 courses on music, for example, now you can't expect an engineering college to start appointing music teachers. But now you can ask the engineering students to take a music course from a nearby degree college, or from a nearby university, or in the worst case online, or Coursera, or something. So the point is, the flexibility can be implemented now because online is an alternative. I saw the other day a college is asking all the students to go for 1 semester internship, which is a very great step. So I said, what happens to their courses? They say, sir, during that semester, they can take all courses online. Now, this kind of thing was not here earlier. So this is a great flexibility. Now you can have internship as well as normal courses. So there are various permutations, combinations you can try, flexibility you can try, and Madhu, I think, was saying ki history as a tourism thing. I mean, I have suggested as a formal paper to the government, let's convert, say, BA. What does BA mean in this country? You can take A plus B plus C, you will get a BA. You can get X plus Y plus Z, you will get a BA. And I mean, people have not appreciated the most flexible course in this country was BA. See, out of 100 courses, you can pick up any 3 and get a BA degree. And once you get a BA degree, you are eligible to be a clerk examination, and you are also eligible to the highest examination in the country. When you write IAS, nobody asks you which were your subjects. That's a very great learning. And now, what I have suggested is we can take, say, BA, A plus B plus C, out of which A plus B plus C, 2 could be academic courses, 3rd could be a vocational skill course. We still call it BA, it doesn't matter. For example, why I remember this is, I have suggested one combination as history, geography, and tourist guide. Now, tourist guide is a vocational course, history and geography are academic subjects, but imagine a tourist guide and his competence if he has learned history and geography as formal subjects. So that way we can make the best of both worlds by combining online and face-to-face. And the only thing, last comment I make is, so far we have been pushed to online education. Everything becomes a joy and a fun when it is a pulling force, not a pushing force. I think we have to create an environment where people welcome online education, try more and more avenues on online education, not that curse COVID and go for online education. I think that part was forced. Now we have to come to voluntary platform for this, and that will make a learning fun. Another very great objective of education, learning and fun together, is again possible in online education. I always give a very crude example. In chemistry, we always teach the students, if you combine A and B, explosion will take place. Now, every teacher teaches that, but no teacher has the guts to create an explosion in the laboratory. He will be thrown out. But I can always create an explosion on the screen of the computer. So therefore, many things which could not be demonstrated can be demonstrated online with much fun here, and that is where education quality will really improve. We only have to learn to make the better of both worlds. Online has given us an additional avenue. Now, how much to make use of it will depend on each one of us. Thank you.
Sir, last question to you, Sir Rajesh Agarwal, sir, that many of the higher education fraternities here, and what are the ways like they can look at skill introduction in their universities, and are there any like thoughts being planned by skill ministry on engagement with the education university education system? Then how do we bridge this gap between skill department and the education ecosystem itself?
See, at a formal level, we have now skill universities coming up.
Yes.
So where at the moment UGC sort of, they get approval from UGC and they offer courses like I mentioned. So a skill university can offer even regular BA, BScs or MVOC, BVOCs. And even in regular BA, I gave an example of integration of skill courses there. So we are in touch with them, and so how to take it to further levels and expand these ideas. That how do skill universities do this? I will give you an example, a practical example. I went to Centurion University, which is a private university in Bhubaneswar. So they teach ITIs and BVOCs and Polytechnic all put together. So I walked into a classroom. So kids of BVOC were working on CATIA software. They had got a order of electric vehicles from Odisha Milk Federation, about 20 vehicles, from design up. So the BVOC kids, boys and girls, they were working on CATIA software, designing the software. तो मैंने ऐसे बच्चों से पंगा लेने के बोला कि यार यहाँ तो पॉट होल्स बहुत हैं, लोग ओवरलोडिंग करते हैं मिल्क कैंस की, आपकी गाड़ी तो पलटी मार जाएगी. Then the kids demonstrated to me on CATIA software कि सर हमने center of gravity बहुत low रखा है, we have gone to field and studied how much is the overloading, कि सड़कें उल्टी सीधी हैं and all that stuff. Then for design, for actual manufacturing, they sent kids to the market to purchase the metal sheets. So the ITI kids of the same campus, they cut those metal sheets. The electrical ITI students and polytechnic guys, they designed the whole electricity system of the vehicle. Kids went out to market, purchased the tires and the battery. So from design up, and the welders of ITI, they did the welding and so on. So it was a beautiful combination of ITI, Polytechnic and BVOC students working together, actually producing something. And after this, Tata's gave them an order of 200 vehicles and so on. So actually all kind of kids working together and producing, manufacturing things, working for industry. So those are great combinations. So skills and universities, they have to work hand in hand. We should not have these artificial boundaries.
So we will sir end this Q&A here, and just a important like step before we close this session, that we will recognize two of the pioneers who are sitting on the stage. So I will request Secretary sir and KK Agrawal sir to we have with us leader from industry, Raghavji, who has played an important role in creating this online ecosystem in this country in last 18 months and supporting a lot of students. So we will have one award of recognition happening to him. So I request कि sir आपके हाथों से हो. So let me just formally announce it from here. May I request my team to kindly bring on a certificate of recognition, and requesting Rajesh Agrawal sir and KK Agrawal sir आप थोड़ा stage के आगे आ जाएं. तो हाँ आगे आ जाएंगे तो फिर it will be a better picture. So this award of recognition given to Raghav Gupta from Coursera for the great work which Coursera has done in this last 18 months in this COVID situation, and they have promoted the online learning in a big way in the country, and they are taking the Indian courses global now. So hats off to you, Coursera, for great initiative. And we also request Secretary sir and Professor KK Agrawal to recognize Madhu Chitkara ji, because the important role which the private university ecosystem is playing, and especially this Chitkara University has been doing an excellent job in creating a lot of pioneering initiatives. She mentioned about several initiatives in her speech itself. So we wish to recognize her initiatives, and what better than having this recognition from Secretary Sir and Professor KK Agrawal. So, and if you can take over the mic.